Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'sukot divrei Torah. Varevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu b'fivcha beit Yisrael v'niyeh anachnu v'tze'etzenu v'tze'etzemcha beit Yisrael. Kulanu yodea shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai lomdei Torah l'amo Yisrael.
Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'cha banu mikol amim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notenu Torah.
Amen.
All right, guys. This part, what we're going to do today, hopefully we get it done, is relatively easy. Firstly, Ark, I'm very proud of you. The reality is, I know I've been to blame to a certain extent. When I was away, what I should have done is upload the notes. What it means, and I'm just going to say this for a half a minute, then we're done, is that if we're doing a new concept and it's got 4 or 5 parts, and I'm already on part 3, but the brain processes slower. You're thinking about it and you think, okay, how would they apply this or that? I've already moved on. So the problem with that is I've noticed if you look at the pattern of our shiur, we've repeated some of them in different ways, more than necessary. And the reason being is because it's difficult when guys don't prep, because we're only as good as the least prepared person. So the least prepared person slows down the group. Now, I'm certainly not saying it hasn't been a pleasure to answer questions, even if we've got to repeat the concepts again and again. But what I'm saying is that nobody still wants to be stuck on book 1. Say I had, in theory, everybody prepared. I think we would have been on daf probably 35 or 37 by now and finished the first book. So I'm saying going forward, if you look at the comparison difference between Arthur before and last night, he was like on steroids. So I think everybody learns better. When I was listening to Rabbi Cohen's shiur, and I wanted Gavin just to learn it, to hear where I was coming from, this is a guy that's one of the best in the world. And when you're listening to the shiur on the 25th daf in the latter part of 24, then what's going to happen is that you listen to this in Tuma and Tara and Dayu and Kol V'chomer and how they extrapolated on 24b3, and that's where it starts, which is virtually in a page or two's time. And then you go daf and half. It is extremely complicated. In fact, how they do it on daf yomi and anybody cups it, I don't know. But the point of it is, if you have to listen to that audio shiur, even if you listen a few times, you still don't know what's going on. I didn't really. The only way that you could know what's going on is to actually read it, absorb it, and have a kind of an idea. And then what happens is when we're going through it together, that just reinforces what you already know. Now, we've been able to get away with it in a lot of cases because we haven't been dealing with hard material. What's coming up is going to be quite difficult. So what I wanted Gavin to do as an exercise is I wanted you just to, because when Gavin said he'd only have time to prep in Jan, I thought, let me just send him what's up on Thursday from Rabbi Cohen. Let me give him 10 or 15 minutes of listening to the shiur. When he takes 2 Nurofen for his headache, he'll prepare. Because Gavin's got a lot of work pressure, understand. But Gav, we've all got to prepare on the same level. Not at this level of mind, but just of Arthur, just to review it. Just read it once. Guys, read it once. That's all I'm asking. But Gavin had a good idea, is that just read what's coming up that particular day. Every shiur is labeled, and I've sent on the group a link to the daf notes. I'll send it again. I don't know if I sent it to Gavin or the group.
Send it to the group.
But the thing of it is, when I finish off, I said 24b3. So it's there. But if you want to know afterwards, the daf page link is there, and just learn what's ready for the next day, then I'll be happy. For your own sake, it's up to you. Then we can fly through. We nearly finished the first book. Kev, are you feeling all right? I know yeah. I know also this time of day is a bit difficult for you.
No, I go over it, and I can't absorb it all. I try to go, and I don't always remember everything. That's no problem. Some weeks I don't prep though.
Listen, you've had some sharp questions. I'm just saying, Gav, even you can't wait till January to do the prep. What's coming up now, just so you can get a lot out of it.
I'm on the spot. I just want to say one thing, Kev.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Kev, I just want to say one thing. How do you learn? Do you read to yourself when you're doing it?
I don't read it aloud like you do.
Okay, so when I read it to myself, I'm doing this, and I say, and Rav said this, and I say, and every time I hit my hand, it's like a trigger in my mind, And it's reinforced. You know what it is? If you sit passively, it's like listening to Damon talk to you and you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
And then listening to you doing nothing.
Yeah.
You're only getting one thing, which is audio, and you're getting a bit of visual. What I find is I've got audio, visual, and action. The three things that are required to remember something. Action is hitting the hand. And like when you discuss with somebody else, you don't sit there going, just listen to talk. You actually talk. You move your body parts. When you talk to somebody, you move. When you're sitting like this, you don't. That's why people move when they talk.
Correct.
Natural. So
absolutely correct.
Gets the action, and it also makes you feel more alive. Other than just reading it. I mean, I've done it before. What I find is I read to myself. I actually start thinking of other things and fall asleep, almost. But when I read it aloud, I'm hearing it, I'm seeing it, and I'm doing the action. All three actions in one.
Completely correct. Completely correct.
And then then I go through once, and I remember about probably 60 to 80% of what I read. Not perfectly. I mean, yesterday I went from 24A all the way to 24B3. Okay, it took me about an hour. Okay, that was it. I'd done the whole thing. I caught up on all the stuff I missed in the beginning, which I didn't understand.
That's all. You do it once and it's done.
And then when Damon talks about it, I say, oh, yes, I remember that from there. And my brain is now just reinstating or reusing what it knows already and not for the first time. Otherwise, like when I wasn't doing it, I was just sitting there going, and Damon can see I was zoning out. I was not understanding. I wasn't bored. I was confused.
Yeah.
And I find even when I listen to a shiur the first time, a new shiur, and I haven't learned the material, even when the rabbi gives it to me, I still find I have to go through the shiur 3-4 times before I get it. But when I read through the notes, I go through it once and then I listen to shiur. It's much better for me as well. I've done that with the rabbi as well, Dan's brother. I read the stuff beforehand, and then I listen to shiur and I understand more what's going on than if I just listen to shiur.
Yeah.
So it's not you, it's how we learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get started. Arthur, thank you for that. And I do think that reading aloud does help. I mean, I've often said to Cranberry the cat, what does Rashi say on this?
And did the cat answer you? Meow. See, my cat's answering. He's meow. He wants to go. Give me a second. Want to go? Boy, here. Yeah, go, boy, go. Go, run. Run. Okay, you want to sit on the windowsill. Yeah.
All right, so let me just do one or two sentences of summary yesterday.
Okay.
All right, bottom line is the owner, there has to be the owner that's warned within a court proceeding. And both factors have to be present in order to make the person known as muad to a certain extent. But when we refer to the ox as muad, we're basically saying that even if the guy comes back from holiday and he hears all this drama unfolding in all three separate cases, bring him to court on the same day, if we say the animal is muad, it's sufficient. If we say that a person has to acclimatize to the news in order to get become aware and make sure that they make a mental note of the animal's what do you call it, habitual behavior, then in that particular case, we have to warn him on 3 separate days. And all we're saying is when we bring in a case of Eidim Zomamim, if you want to make the animal muad where the person can be warned on one day, 3 separate court cases, it's much easier to find out conspiring witnesses than a case where it's happening on 3 successive days, because what can happen is a witness can say, I didn't know Ruvain would come and testify against you tomorrow. I only sought to make you liable for the TUM payment. And therefore, as the Eidim Zomamim being caught out, you can only make me pay the TUM payment. Whereas it's easier to catch out conspiring witnesses if we hold that the animal is muad, and therefore it's 3 separate days where the animal has caused the goring, but when he comes back from holiday, he's got court cases that whole day and the drama has ensued. That's lovely. Probably figured he should have stayed in Australia. Anyway, that being the case...
Can I ask you something?
Yeah, sure.
Is it, instead of always going to the best end, let's forget about there being fake witnesses. Let's presume the witnesses are legit. It's his next door neighbor. And let's say he's quite happy to settle out of court. Can he do that? Just pay half?
So not in this. Okay, in a lot of cases, absolutely. In fact, if we don't trouble the court, he doesn't have to pay penalty payments and other things like that. So Gavin is correct in most cases. This case is an exception because it says in Exodus Shmot chapter 21, verse 29, he does not guard his animal, but if the owner is apprised of his muad actions in a way that does not enable him to guard it from committing future attacks. And therefore, what has to happen is that he has to be warned within a court proceeding. If it's not within a court proceeding and the owner isn't there, in this particular case, it's not fulfilling the obligations that he's forewarned, because this is used as a protection for the owner. In fact, the Exodus exact verse starts on chapter 21, verse 29, and it says, "And it was testified against the ox's owner." And the verse continues, "And he does not guard it," clearly indicating that his liabilities for failure to guard his animal had he known to be moored. So in this particular case, Gavin, the reason why we have a court proceeding is in order to protect the owner of the ox, that if there are future events, he's got a claim to say, I wasn't warned in the official forum. So it's a protection to the owner. I'm not saying that in other cases of theft or legal cases you can't settle out of court, but this is a public hazard. And because the nature of an animal being a public hazard can endanger or kill the lives of other people, as well as animals, there has to be an official setting where that person is warned. It's not just about financial restitution. It's about the court documenting that the person that owns the animal is aware, the person being officially made aware and warned, to protect both the public and the individual's rights.
I agree. All right, thank you. And they probably clipped the ear of the ox or something like that.
I don't know. We suggested previously it could have been a form of branding or ear clipping or anything like
branding.
that. Or maybe ear clipping. I don't know. All I know is by the time your ox gets jittery twice, according to Rav Yehuda, says you need 3 separate days in order to calm down, and not according to Rav Meir, who said one time it does not poke at the children. I would start to sell it for sirloin. Just my thoughts. What do you need the coffee payment and to be almost broke from this thing killing a person for? You don't need it. Okay, because how's it going to revert back to tam status and full kofir versus no full kofir and all these other dramas? Is get rid of it. I say rump steak and sirloin is the way to go. All right, moving along. One of the things we discussed is, and Kevin asked a good question yesterday. Kev, Shane, I know it's an exhausting time of morning for you.
No, I didn't sleep much last night. I couldn't sleep, so it's not that.
All right, this is like dental work. Don't worry, it's nearly over. What Kevin asked is, how does the payment work, etc. So listen, what happens here. These are not 3 separate sets of witnesses in one court case. They're 3 separate court cases. This is what you have to bear in mind. This is going to opinion of Rava. Rava said on the 3rd case that animal is liable for the muad payment. All the rabbis turn around and say, on the 3rd case it's muad, but we only pay full payment on the 4th case because the owner has to be warned. Why are we going according to Rava, according to this case, says Rashi? Well, it's obvious that it's easier to prove Adam Zomamim when you're trying to convict on the 3rd case, not the 4th. So it just sets up the perfect scenario. So what are we saying here in a very straightforward way? Say all 3 sets of witnesses are conspiring over 3 court cases. Now, practically, Gavin and I had a question yesterday, how would this work? Because once the court case and the hammer goes down, the gavel goes down, and they say, listen, you owe Ishponi such and such, that's the end of the court case. So I don't know how, when that would work, when there was a 3rd case and they found Adam Zomamim in the 3rd case and then worked out the first 2 sets of witnesses in the first 2 cases were Adam Zomamim, how they would retract that statement and alter it. I don't know the court process. But let's assuming they have a methodology in terms of how to do it. What the Gemara says outright is as follows, is that they all share the muad payment, because without the 3 sets of witnesses, you couldn't have had conviction of the muad payment in the 3rd case. Okay? You couldn't have had conviction payment in the 3rd case. So this is how it would work. All right, Kevin, this is how it works. Kevin asked a question yesterday. He said, how does this practically work? So you take the cases separately, because your ox in the first case of goring, whether it's genuine or the witnesses are found to be conspiring, would have your ox that would damage another person or another ox, either injure or kill it, and there would be a certain cost factor. So for Tam, first thing you work out is half payment damages, and the second leniency you work out would be from the gufa of the attacking animal. And the reason being is that if you had a puny little scrawny attacking animal, that would be the maximum cap at which you would pay. So if you owed 300 zuz, but your animal was Tam, not you, the other guys, your animal was Tam, but you owed 300 zuz in damage, you pay 150 for a Tam offense, and then say yours was a puny little attacking ox, and your ox was worth 110 zuz. You pay to the capacity of the attacking ox value. So you pay 110 zuz. Do you see that, Kev? Kev?
Yeah.
You see that?
Yeah,
Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, say the last line. You said that you play the value of the maximum of its value of the attacking.
Okay, so say the first case is as follows. Gav, are you ready? Okay.
I'm there.
So the first case, you owe, your ox has done a lot of damage. It's done 300 zuz worth of damage, but it's a first offense. Your ox is tame, or a second offense, or whatever, and you now pay half the payment, which is 150 zuz. But your attacking ox is a puny little thing, and it's 110 zuz worth of value, the value of your attacking ox. You would sell your ox or pay the financial equivalent of 110 zuz, not the 150, because your second leniency is on the gufa of the animal. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Kev, you still confused?
Yeah.
It makes sense, yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So two leniencies, half payment, and then the second one on the body of the animal. If your ox happens to be a big thing, well, you're not going to have that second leniency working for you. And on the muad case, full payment from choice property. Fine. That being said, you've got the appraisal for case one. The appraisal for case two, say both oxes attack each other. This is just another thing. And then in that particular case, we will deal separately with when two oxes attack each other and the differential of payment. That's not the course of the shear. But so for the course of the shear, let's just do it standardly. One ox minding its own business, and your ox apparently attacked this ox. So your second payment is also time, say you owe 100 zuz. So far we have 210 zuz. Okay, and your ox ends up being heavier than the half payment damage. So the second leniency doesn't kick in. So you've got 210 zuz worth of feet, right? Then you have a third case where it's a muad payment and it's 200 zuz. And in this particular case, you'd owe the full 200 zuz from choice property. So you're sitting at 410 zuz. Then you find out, the court finds out that all three conspiring witnesses, occur in these three separate cases. In that case, you've got 410, zuz worth of fee. And what we do is we split that amongst the three, okay? So that works out to be 130, basically 137 zuz each, that each of those people have to pay. Now, why do those other two witnesses have to pay it? The Gemara said, because without their testimony, you couldn't have made them muad for the third case. And since they were all conspiring, they're entitled to share the damage for the muad payment as well, equally, because they were all a party to the false testimony. That's all we had to say. Let's just read on and then deal with some new subject matter. Fine. So we stated, and regarding a case such as this is stated, and you shall do unto him as he planned, etc. So why the Gemara keeps bringing this up and quoting Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 19, is it's saying, listen, the false witnesses on the Tam cases, if it proves that it's all on one day, and you can see that there's a link between conspiring witnesses, they cannot have in their defense, I was only merely trying to make the owner of the ox liable for the Tam portion, because that's all I testified about. Because without their testimony, there wouldn't have been more payments to start with. The only time that they're entitled to the reciprocal payment, paying tam, is when they're neither witnesses. So clearly they couldn't have tried a stunt there. When all three are, so all it's saying is when all three are found to be Eidim Zomamim together, the first two can't claim defense and say that they're not entitled to share the muad payment of the third. That's all it's saying. Fine. Now 24A4. Now, if you say that the 3 days are needed in order to make an ox muad, it's fine. The Brisa holds all three groups of Zomamim liable for conspiring to make the ox muad. Okay. So, in order for Zomamim to be held liable for a consequence that would have ensued from their false testimony, it must be evident that they intended their victim should suffer that consequence. Now, so if the purpose of the 3 days is simply to make an ox muad, the Brisa could probably be referring to a case where it's evident that the first two groups of Zomamim intended to make the owner liable to full damages for the third incident. So this would be a case in which the victim of the alleged third goring is the one who brings all three groups of witnesses to testify on one day, even if they're three separate trials, about three incidents they allege happened on 3 separate days. Okay. So all we're saying is when you say that the person is muad and it's occurring over 3 separate days, the warning of the owner, it's much more difficult to organize Eidim Zomamim and far more difficult to prove it. All right, let's read on. 24b1. But if you say that the 3 days are needed in order to make the person a muad, then necessarily the 3 groups must have to testify on 3 separate days. Accordingly, let the first witness claim, did we know that in 3 days hence these other witnesses would come and make him muad? So what we're saying is as follows. If you want to judge that we have to make the person muad, not just the animal, by warning the owner 3 times, what is the classical defense the first group of witnesses would come to have when you come to say, listen, we checked you out and you false witnesses? And so, listen, we didn't know there'd be other witnesses on subsequent days. How do we know? So it's very difficult then to convict them on a muad payment. You could only convict them on a tam payment for falsely accusing this person of the act. That's all it's saying. So the Gemara notes a similar objection could apparently be raised against the other view as well. What's it saying? It's saying, okay, so let's say that the animal is muad in this case and not the person. We understand the objection of making a person a muad. But let's say the animal is muad, meaning 3 separate gorings, but you could warn the owner on one particular day. This is the objection. Rav Ashi repeated this discussion in the presence of Rav Kahana, and he said to me, okay, Rav Kahana obviously said to Rav Ashi, and if the 3 days are needed in order to make the ox a muad, is all well. Why? According to that view, let the last witness claim. How were we to know that all were standing in the court were coming to testify against this ox? So what he's saying is, you could even have a case, this is the objection on the other side, where if you made the ox muad, all 3 witnesses come in one day. In that particular case, it says, how were we to know that the others were standing in the court were coming to testify against this ox? We only came to make the person liable for half damages. So what it's saying is, say you catch the third group out for Eidim Zomamim, and they're all testifying on one day. Can't the 2 witnesses have the same claim saying, okay, you caught us as false witnesses, but we only intended to make this person liable for our particular case of tam, half payment damages with the leniency of the kufa of the animal and the half payment. We didn't know there'd be another 2 sets of witnesses coming on this day. So that's Rav Kahana's objection to where you can't make the false witnesses pay for the third case. So the Gemara answered Rav Kahana's objection and said, according to the position that the purpose of the 3 days is to make an ox muad, and all 3 groups can therefore testify on the same day, the Brisa could refer to where the first witnesses conspiratorially signal to the third group to testify. So what it's saying is as follows, is look, one of 2 things could have happened. They all came to testify at the same time. Each was certainly aware of what the other meant to testify about. That's the third group, 2, certainly intended to make the oxen muad. That's according to Rashi. Okay. So this indicates that the third group is part of the conspiracy to make the oxen muad. And this sort of explanation is only possible according to if you make the ox muad where they testify against them in one day. So this would be an answer to Rav Kahana, but we still have an objection to what you're saying if you make a person muad, where the testimony would have to come on 3 separate days. Okay. Rav Ashi gives another answer himself, because remember he had a discussion with Rav Kahana. He said in response to Rav Kahana's objection, according to the position that the purpose of the 3 days is to make the oxen muad, and all 3 groups can therefore testify on the same day, the brisa could refer to where all the 3 groups came to court one after the other. Meaning if they came to court one after the other, they would be aware of where the other 2 cases are. Let me tell you why. You sit in the court box and you listen to the trials. You hear the trial of the person coming up. You hear the second trial. When you come for the muad payment, you would be very scared, because if you intended to make that person liable for half payment damages, now you've made them liable for full damages if you're conspiring witnesses, because you heard the other 2 cases presented before in court while you were waiting for your 3rd case. And therefore, there's no excuse. All right, guys, we're going to end on this note. I hope today was a decent show for you guys.
It was good. Thanks, James.
Pleasure. Lovely to see you guys.
Ciao, bye.
Yeah, cheers.